Mom, you'll just be more comfortable back there. You know you don't really like all that fancy fuss anyway. My daughter, Maya, said it with a perfectly practiced glossy smile. The exact same smile she used when she was live streaming to her followers or trying to talk her way out of a parking ticket. We were standing right in the middle of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. It was a Tuesday morning, and the terminal was a chaotic swarm of rushing travelers, rolling suitcases, and blaring overhead announcements. But in that specific fraction of a second, the entire world around me went completely, terrifyingly silent. I looked down at the thin piece of paper she had just casually slid into my hand. Seat 42, E, a middle seat, right next to the restrooms, on a 9-hour flight to Honolulu. I slowly lifted my eyes to look at her. She was holding 2 other boarding passes in her manicured fingers. First-class boarding passes. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it felt like it scraped against my throat. "Hello, everyone. My name is Samira. I am 50 years old, and for my entire adult life, I have lived by one single, unbreakable rule. Family comes first, no matter what it costs you. Tell me honestly, how many of you listening right now have poured every single drop of your energy, your youth, and your hard-earned money into your children, only to have them look right through you the moment they feel they don't need you anymore? If you know that unique, hollow pain in your chest, then pull up a chair and stay a while. Because the story I'm about to share with you is going to sound painfully, fiercely familiar. To truly understand what happened at that airport, you have to understand exactly where I came from and why I loved my daughter the way I did. You see, I am not a wealthy woman. I didn't inherit a trust fund, and I certainly don't wear designer suits to work. For the past 22 years, I have been the head cafeteria manager at a massive public high school here in Fulton County. My alarms go off at 4:30 in the morning every single weekday. I spend 8 to 10 hours a day standing on unforgiving tile floors, wrestling with heavy industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce, managing a loud kitchen staff, and making sure hundreds of teenagers get a hot, decent meal. By the time I get home, my feet throb with a dull ache that never really goes away, my lower back screams, and my hands constantly smell faintly of bleach and chopped onions. It is honest, exhausting, back-breaking work. Every single dollar I have ever made was earned with sweat, and almost every single dollar I managed to save went straight to my daughter. I had my reasons for being so fiercely protective. When I was just 20 years old, my parents died in a terrible, sudden accident. It completely shattered my world. But the grief wasn't the only thing I had to survive. Before the dirt was even fully settled on their graves, my older brother kicked me out of the house we grew up in. He claimed he needed to sell it to cover his own debts, and just like that, I was entirely on my own. I had nothing but a cheap suitcase, a broken heart, and a terrifying realization that nobody in this world was coming to save me. That day, standing on the curb with nowhere to go, I made a solemn vow to myself. If I ever had a child of my own, she would never ever know what it feels like to be abandoned. She would never feel the cold, sharp sting of a closed door. So when Maya came along, she became my entire universe. I raised her as a single mother, and I worked double shifts just to make sure she had the brand-name sneakers the other kids had. I paid for the expensive braces, the summer cheerleading camps, and the out-of-state college tuition that took me 5 agonizing years to pay off after she graduated. I wanted her to have the soft, beautiful life that I was violently denied. Even after she grew up and married Jordan, I kept that safety net pulled tight beneath them. Jordan was a man whose smile was as flashy and hollow as his credit score. He worked in sales consulting, which seemed to mean he owned a lot of expensive suits, but rarely had a steady paycheck. Whenever they couldn't afford the down payment on their house in the suburbs, Mom handled it. When Jordan's business had a slow quarter and they needed help with my grandson Leo's private school tuition, Mom quietly wrote the check. I convinced myself I was just being a good, supportive mother, but looking back, I realized I wasn't helping them build a life. I was funding a grand illusion. Maya and Jordan lived entirely for the aesthetic. If a moment couldn't be captured on camera, filtered, and posted online to make other people jealous, it simply didn't happen. Jordan leased luxury cars he had no business driving, and Maya carried handbags that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I never said a word, even though I was wearing the same worn-out winter coat for the 6th year in a row. 3 months ago, the illusion reached a breaking point. They came over to my house for our usual Sunday dinner. I had spent all afternoon on my feet, frying chicken, making collard greens, and baking my grandmother's famous peach cobbler. As we sat around my modest, scratched dining table, Jordan cleared his throat and adjusted his oversized, shiny watch. "Mama Samira," he started, using that smooth, practiced salesman voice he always pulled out right before he asked for money. "Maya and I are coming up on our 5th wedding anniversary. We were looking at this incredible resort in Maui, the Grand Wailea. It's a huge milestone, you know. We've been working so hard and we really need to reconnect." Maya reached across the table, her perfectly manicured acrylic nails resting gently over my calloused, scarred hands. "And Mom, we want you to come with us. You work so incredibly hard. You never take time for yourself. You need a vacation more than anyone. Plus, Leo would absolutely love to have his Nana there to build sandcastles with him." My heart instantly melted. My grandson Leo was 8 years old and possessed the sweetest, most genuine soul I had ever known. He was the one bright, beautiful thing in their chaotic household. The thought of walking barefoot on a warm Hawaiian beach, holding my grandson's hand and listening to the ocean, made the chronic exhaustion in my bones temporarily fade away. "Oh, babies," I said softly, looking down at my plate. "I don't know if I can afford a luxury trip to Hawaii right now. Things are a bit tight." Jordan waved his hand dismissively, laughing as if I had just told a cute joke. "Don't even worry about the heavy logistics, Mama. We'll handle all the bookings so we can sit together on the plane and get the family rate at the resort. We just need you to cover your portion of the flights and maybe help secure the hotel deposit for the family suite. We will pay you back the second my quarterly bonus hits next month." When my quarterly bonus hits, I had heard that exact phrase more times than I could count over the last 5 years. But looking into Maya's bright, hopeful eyes and picturing little Leo playing in the surf, I deliberately ignored the heavy, sinking knot in the pit of my stomach. I stood up, walked over to my worn leather purse, pulled out my primary credit card, and handed it directly to Jordan. I didn't just give them a piece of plastic that day. I gave them direct access to the secret nest egg I had been painstakingly building for a decade. For years, I had dreamed of leaving the school cafeteria and opening my own small neighborhood bakery. I had the recipes, I had the drive, and I finally had just enough saved up for a commercial lease. But I pushed that dream back into the dark corner of my mind, locking it away so my daughter could have her picture-perfect anniversary. Because family helps family, right? That's what a good mother does. Fast forward to the morning of the flight. I had barely slept the night before. I had packed my best linen pants, bought a new wide-brimmed sun hat, and even treated myself to a cheap drugstore pedicure. I was practically buzzing with pure, unfiltered excitement as Jordan's leased SUV pulled up to the Delta drop-off curb. But from the very second we unloaded the trunk, a strange, uncomfortable feeling began to creep over me. Maya and Jordan were rolling 3 massive, brand-new hard-shell designer suitcases. I recognized the brand instantly because I had just seen the $1,200 charge on my credit card statement 2 weeks prior. When I asked about it, Maya had casually brushed it off, claiming it was a necessary one-time travel expense to keep their formal wear from wrinkling. We walked into the terminal, the bright fluorescent lights reflecting off the polished floors. At the priority check-in counter, Jordan confidently handled the kiosk, aggressively tapping the screen while Maya checked her lip gloss in her phone's front-facing camera. The machine whirred and spit out the boarding passes. Jordan grabbed them quickly, his eyes immediately darting toward Maya. They exchanged a look, a silent, heavily calculated glance that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I had seen that look before. It was the look they gave each other right before they explained why they couldn't pay me back. Maya took the passes from him, cleared her throat softly, and turned to face me with that bright, glossy smile. "All right, Mom, here you go," she said, extending her hand. I took the single, flimsy piece of paper. I looked down at the black ink. Economy, seat 42, E-boarding group 8. I blinked, thoroughly confused, my brain struggling to process the information. "Maya, sweetie, is this right? I thought Jordan said we were all booking together so we could sit as a family. Where are your tickets? Where is Leo sitting?" Maya didn't look embarrassed. She didn't flinch. She didn't even have the basic decency to look slightly guilty. She casually adjusted the strap of her heavy designer bag, the exact same bag she bought the very week she called me crying because she couldn't afford her electricity bill. "Oh, Leo is staying with Jordan's parents this week," she said breezily, dropping the first bombshell without blinking. We decided an adults-only trip would be better for our anniversary vibe. Before I could even react to the fact that my grandson, the entire reason I agreed to this trip, wasn't coming, she continued. And as for the seats, well, her voice dripped with that patronizing, syrupy tone people usually reserve for toddlers or the elderly. Jordan found this amazing last-minute upgrade for first class at the kiosk, but they only had 2 seats left together. And you know Jordan's lower back has been bothering him lately. He really needs the lay-flat bed for a flight this long. Besides, Mom, you'll be so much more comfortable back there in economy. You don't really like all that fancy fuss and people waiting on you anyway. I stood frozen, the chaotic, deafening noise of the Atlanta airport swirling around me, feeling as though I had just been violently struck across the face. You'll be more comfortable back there. I looked over at Jordan. He was suddenly incredibly interested in the digital departures board hovering above us, completely avoiding my gaze. He stood with the quiet, smug posture of a man who had just successfully pulled off a brilliant magic trick. You upgraded to first class, I said slowly, testing the bitter weight of the words on my tongue. With the credit card I gave you? Maya's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a sharp flash of annoyance. Mom, please don't make a scene, she hissed, her eyes darting nervously left and right to see if anyone in the priority line was watching us. It's literally just a flight. It's like 8 or 9 hours, tops. You can watch a movie and take a nap. We'll see you at baggage claim in Honolulu. Just go to your gate, okay? You're going to hold up the line. Don't make a scene. Those 4 words echoed and bounced around the inside of my skull. For 50 years, I had been the woman who never, ever made a scene. I swallowed my pride when the school district unfairly cut our cafeteria budget. I smiled through the bone-deep exhaustion when I worked double shifts on holidays. I quietly, diligently paid the utility bills and the mortgages while my daughter played pretend rich on the internet. I had made myself small, quiet, and endlessly accommodating so that she could take up all the space in the world. I looked down at the boarding pass, trembling slightly in my hand. Seat 42E, a middle seat, wedged between strangers, right next to the smell of the airplane bathroom. Suddenly, a vivid, agonizing montage of the last 10 years flashed before my eyes. The thousands of dollars in loans that were never repaid. The countless hours I spent cooking for them while they complained about the presentation. The bakery dream I kept pushing further and further away, locking it in a mental box so Maya could maintain her picture-perfect hollow life. I wasn't just sitting in the middle seat on an airplane. I was sitting in the middle seat of my own life. They had placed me exactly where they firmly believed I belonged. In the back, out of sight, meant to be ignored, and useful only for the credit limit on my card. I looked at Maya, my beautiful, confident daughter, wrapped in expensive fabrics paid for by my early mornings and aching joints, looking at me like I was an embarrassing burden she had to briefly manage before her real vacation could begin. And in that exact moment, something fundamental broke inside me. It wasn't a loud, dramatic, shattering break. It was a very quiet, very clean snap, like a dry, dead twig being stepped on by a heavy boot. The maternal guilt, the lifelong obligation, the desperate, clawing need to be the good, sacrificing mother just evaporated into the cold airport air. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the boarding pass in her face. I didn't make a scene. I simply looked at Maya, offered her a small, terrifyingly calm smile, and said, "You're absolutely right, Maya. It's just a flight." She let out a loud, audible sigh of relief, her posture instantly relaxing. "See? I knew you'd understand. You really are the best, Mom. Go grab yourself a coffee or something. We'll get you a really nice flower lei when we land, I promise." "Have a good flight," I told them, my voice completely steady. I turned around and started walking away from the check-in counter. But I didn't walk toward the TSA security checkpoint. I didn't follow the signs toward Concourse A, B, or C. I walked straight toward a quiet, empty coffee shop located near the terminal exit doors. I ordered a black coffee, sat down at a small table near the window, and watched the massive commercial planes taxiing slowly on the tarmac outside. The Georgia morning sun was just starting to peek through the massive glass windows, casting long, warm, golden shadows across the polished floor. I opened my purse and pulled out my iPad. Women my age are constantly underestimated when it comes to technology. Maya always assumed I barely knew how to send a text message with an emoji. She conveniently forgot that a woman who personally manages the daily digital inventory, payroll software, and complex vendor contracts for a massive public school cafeteria knows exactly how to navigate a secure digital system. I connected to the airport Wi-Fi and opened my banking application. There it was, sitting right at the top of my recent transactions. The pending charges. Delta Airlines, first class upgrade, $3,400. The Grand Wailea Resort, Ocean View Suite, deposit and prepayment, $4,200. Jordan was clever, I'll give him that much. He knew the first-class flight upgrade was strictly non-refundable through the airline's automated system at this late hour. He thought he had me perfectly trapped. He thought I would just obediently trudge to the back of the plane, eat my little complimentary bag of salty pretzels, and let them sip expensive champagne on my dime, simply because that's what mothers do. We endure. We suffer in silence. But Jordan, for all his flashy suits and smooth talking, didn't understand how my specific credit card worked. Because I had spent decades building a flawless credit history, my primary card was an elite tier account. And it came with a very specific, very powerful feature: a 24/7 dedicated fraud, dispute, and account management concierge service. I tapped the screen and dialed the 1-800 number on the back of my card. A polite professional representative named David answered after the first ring. "Good morning, Ms. Washington. Thank you for your loyalty. How can I assist you today?" "Hi, David," I said, my voice dropping an octave, sounding much more like the fierce cafeteria boss who negotiates with aggressive food suppliers than a weeping, disappointed mother. "I need to report a series of unauthorized upgrades and cancel multiple pending travel authorizations immediately." "Of course, ma'am. I can certainly help with that. Which specific charges are we looking at today?" "The Delta Airlines first-class upgrade for the passengers, Maya and Jordan, and the hotel authorization for the Grand Wailea Resort in Maui. In fact, I need you to cancel the entire hotel reservation completely. It was booked under my card to guarantee the room, but I am no longer traveling. I want all financial holds released, the deposit refunded to my account, and the authorization formally revoked." I could hear David typing rapidly on his keyboard for a moment. "Ma'am, I have those located. I just need to inform you. Revoking the hotel authorization at this stage means the reservation will be canceled unless the guests arriving present a brand new, valid form of payment at the check-in desk for the full amount, plus incidentals. And disputing the flight upgrade while the passengers are at the gate may flag their tickets in the airline system." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee. It tasted rich, intensely bitter, and incredibly waking. "I understand the consequences perfectly, David," I said, looking out at a plane lifting heavily into the sky. "Please proceed with the cancellations." It took exactly 4 minutes. 4 minutes of clicking and typing to completely undo 3 months of their selfish planning and entitlement. I thanked David and hung up the phone. I sat there in the quiet cafe, listening to the hum of the espresso machine. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel heartbroken or betrayed. For the first time in 22 years, I felt unbelievably light. I felt like a woman who had just dropped a 100-pound weight off her shoulders that she didn't even realize she had been carrying her entire life. I stood up, picked up my modest carry-on bag, and walked straight out of the sliding glass doors of the airport, stepping out into the bright, warm Atlanta sunlight. The line of taxis and Ubers was incredibly busy, filled with stressed people rushing to begin their various journeys. But my journey had just ended. Or rather, the real one had just finally begun. I pulled out my phone in order to ride back to my neighborhood. As I sat in the quiet back seat of the car, watching the beautiful city skyline roll by through the window, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was an automated calendar notification I had set up months ago. 10 a.m., call Marcus, real estate agent, about the vacant bakery space on 4th Street. I had originally planned to cancel that meeting today. I had planned to call Marcus and tell him I couldn't afford the commercial lease deposit because I was going to Hawaii to celebrate my daughter. I stared at the notification for a long moment. Then I hit the call button. "Hello, Marcus?" I said when the agent picked up, my voice ringing with a new, unfamiliar confidence. "It's Samira Washington. Yes, I'm actually still in town, and I have my deposit ready. I'd like to come down and sign the lease for the bakery today." I hung up the phone, looking out the window with a genuine smile on my face. Somewhere, 30,000 feet in the air, my daughter and her husband were settling into their wide leather seats, sipping their pre-departure champagne, completely and blissfully unaware that the financial safety net they had bounced on for their entire adult lives had just been permanently removed. They wanted a luxury, adults-only vacation. Well, they were about to get a very brutal masterclass in what it actually costs to be an adult. The ride back to my neighborhood from the airport was the quietest, most peaceful 30 minutes I had experienced in 2 decades. For years, my mind had been a constant, exhausting checklist of other people's emergencies. Did Jordan pay the electric bill on time this month? Does Maya have enough in her checking account for her car insurance? Does Leo need new cleats for soccer season? My brain was a crowded, noisy room where my own needs were never allowed a seat at the table. But sitting in the back of that car, watching the Atlanta skyline shimmer in the morning heat, that mental room was suddenly completely empty. It was just me. For the first time since my parents passed away when I was 20, I was the only person I was responsible for. By the time the driver dropped me off in front of the small, vacant brick building on 4th Street, my hands were actually shaking. Not from fear or anger, but from a terrifying electric kind of excitement. Marcus, the real estate agent, was already waiting by the front door, jingling a set of heavy brass keys. He was a kind, older gentleman who had been incredibly patient with me over the last 6 months as I repeatedly looked at this commercial space, negotiated the terms, and then heartbreakingly pulled away at the last second because Maya had suddenly needed a temporary loan. "Samira," Marcus called out, a broad, genuine smile spreading across his face. "I'll be honest, when you called me this morning, I was shocked. I thought you were halfway to the Pacific Ocean by now." "There was a change of plans, Marcus," I said, my voice steady, sounding stronger than it had in years. "A very necessary change of plans." He unlocked the heavy glass door and pushed it open. The space used to be an old diner in the late 90s, and it still smelled faintly of decades-old coffee and dusty wood. The floor tiles were scuffed, the walls needed a fresh coat of warm paint, and the display cases were completely empty. To anyone else, it looked like a massive, expensive renovation project. But to me, looking at the sunlight streaming through the large front windows, it looked like absolute heaven. It looked like the bakery I had been designing in my head during thousands of hours of standing over boiling pots in the high school cafeteria. "I have the lease agreement right here," Marcus said, pulling a thick folder from his briefcase and setting it on the dusty countertop. "I didn't change a single term. 5 years, fixed rate. You just need to sign, provide the cashier's check for the deposit and first month's rent, and the keys are yours, Samira. It's a big step." I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out the elite credit card that was currently funding my daughter's illusion of wealth. I pulled out a certified cashier's check drawn directly from my personal savings account, the money I had fiercely guarded and hidden from Jordan's constant probing questions about my finances. I picked up the black pen Marcus offered me. Just as the tip of the pen touched the thick paper of the contract, my cell phone, buried deep inside my leather purse, began to ring. It was a custom ringtone, a bright, cheerful pop song I had assigned to Maya years ago. Usually, the sound of that song sent a spike of pure anxiety straight through my chest, because a phone call from Maya during the workday never meant, "I love you, Mom." It almost always meant, "Mom, I have an emergency and I need money." I paused, the pen hovering a millimeter above the signature line. Marcus looked at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "Do you need to get that?" "We have time." I looked at my purse. I calculated the time zones in my head. With the time difference and the long flight, Maya and Jordan should have just landed at the Kahului Airport in Maui. They were probably standing at the polished mahogany check-in desk of the Grand Wailea Resort, breathing in the scent of fresh orchids and ocean salt, completely expecting the hotel staff to hand them the keys to a $4,000 oceanfront suite on my dime. The phone stopped ringing. Then, almost immediately, it started ringing again. I took a deep, slow breath, letting the dusty, quiet air of my future bakery fill my lungs. I looked at Marcus, offered him a small, polite smile, and pressed the pen firmly onto the paper. "No," I said smoothly, signing my name with a flourish I didn't know I possessed. "It's just spam. Let it ring." I signed all 4 pages. I handed Marcus the check. He handed me the heavy brass keys. The moment those cold, metallic keys dropped into the palm of my hand, tears finally pricked the corners of my eyes. But they were not tears of grief for the daughter I had left at the airport. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief for the woman I had finally found. I spent the next 3 hours in that empty bakery. I swept the floors, measuring the spaces where the commercial ovens would go. visualizing the display cases filled with fresh peach cobblers, sweet potato pies, and warm, buttery croissants. I was completely lost in my own world, building a future that belonged entirely to me. It wasn't until I sat down on a milk crate near the back door to drink a bottle of water that I finally pulled my phone out of my purse. The screen was completely lit up with notifications. 14 missed calls, 6 from Maya, 8 from Jordan, and 3 new voicemails. I took a sip of water, tapped the screen, and put the phone to my ear, listening to the first voicemail. "Mom, it's me." Maya's voice came through the speaker. She didn't sound panicked yet, just deeply, supremely annoyed. The kind of annoyance she usually reserved for a waiter who got her complicated coffee order wrong. "Listen, we just got to the resort and the front desk clerk is being completely ridiculous. He's saying your card authorization was pulled this morning and the hold on the suite is gone. Did your bank flag the transaction as fraud because you didn't put a travel notice on it? You need to call the bank right now and clear it up. Call me back the second you get this. We're just sitting in the lobby and I am exhausted." The entitlement in her voice was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if I had made it back home safely from the airport. She just demanded that I fix the inconvenience interrupting her luxury vacation. I deleted the message and played the second one. This one was from Jordan. "Hey, Mama Samira," Jordan's voice echoed through the speaker. He was using that smooth, overly confident tone again, but this time I could hear a tight, nervous strain underneath it. "Yeah, so, a little hiccup here at check-in. The reservation was completely canceled in the system. The front desk manager is saying the primary cardholder actually called to revoke the authorization. Obviously, that's some kind of crazy clerical error on Delta's or the hotel's end. But listen, they won't give us the keys to the suite without a new card on file for the deposit and the full stay, plus incidentals. It's about $4,200. Just call me back so I can conference you in with the manager and we can run your card manually. Talk to you in a few." I actually laughed out loud in the empty room. A clerical error. Jordan was so blinded by his own arrogance that his brain couldn't even compute the reality that a 50-year-old cafeteria manager had outsmarted him. He genuinely believed that the world revolved around his desires, and that I was just a malfunctioning ATM that needed to be rebooted. I took another sip of water, my heart beating at a slow, calm rhythm, and played the third and final voicemail. This one was different. The smooth confidence was entirely gone. The annoyance had completely vanished. What replaced it was pure, unadulterated chaos. Mom, pick up the damn phone!" Maya was practically screaming into the receiver. In the background, I could hear the distinct sounds of a busy hotel lobby, luggage carts rolling, people talking, and the sharp, angry voice of Jordan arguing with someone. "Mom, what did you do?" Maya sobbed, her voice cracking with a level of panic I hadn't heard from her since she was a teenager. Jordan tried to put his credit cards down for the room deposit, and they all declined. Every single one of them. He tried 3 different cards, Mom. The manager embarrassed us in front of the entire lobby. They told us we have to leave the property if we can't provide a valid form of payment. I closed my eyes, listening to the frantic unraveling of the grand illusion. Suddenly, in the background of the voicemail, the phone must have been pulled away from Maya's mouth, because I heard her screaming at her husband. "What do you mean they're maxed out, Jordan? You said your bonus covered the luggage. You said the cars were paid for. Where is your corporate card?" "I don't have the corporate card, Maya. Stop yelling." Jordan's voice was panicked, defensive, and desperate. "Just call your mother. Make her fix it." "I've been calling her. She's ignoring me." "Jordan, look at me. Look at me. Why are all the cards declining?" There was a brief, static-filled pause on the recording. And then I heard the confession. The massive, heavy truth that had been hiding beneath the designer suits, the leased cars, and the constant requests for temporary loans. "I lost my job, Maya," Jordan shouted, his voice finally breaking under the weight of his own lies. "Okay? Are you happy now? I got let go 3 months ago. They fired me. We don't have any money. We've been living on a credit and your mother's cash for 90 days. I thought I could land a new consulting gig before you noticed, but I didn't. We have literally $0 in our checking account." "You've been unemployed for 3 months?" Maya shrieked, a sound of pure, visceral horror. "The suitcases, the anniversary dinner, my car payment last week. You made me beg my mother for money while you were sitting at home doing nothing? I was trying to protect you. Just get her on the phone. She has to pay for the room, Maya. We literally don't have money for a cab back to the airport. The voicemail abruptly cut off, plunging my quiet bakery back into absolute silence. I sat there on the milk crate, staring blankly at the dusty floorboards, the reality of what I had just heard washing over me in cold, heavy waves. 3 months. Jordan had been unemployed for a full quarter of the year. While he was sitting at my dining room table, adjusting his expensive watch and smoothly asking me to fund an extravagant Hawaiian vacation to celebrate his hard work, he had been completely, utterly broke. He hadn't just been relying on my safety net. He had woven his entire fraudulent life out of it. He had intentionally pushed me into an economy seat next to the bathrooms while he flew first class, using my money, knowing full well he was unemployed and drowning in debt. And Maya, my beautiful, obsessed with appearances daughter, had blindly gone along with it, perfectly content to sacrifice my dignity as long as it maintained her aesthetic. For a fleeting, terrifying second, the old me, the good mother, flared up in my chest. A dark wave of guilt threatened to choke me. My daughter was stranded on an island thousands of miles away, sitting in a hotel lobby with a liar for a husband, completely humiliated, with no money for food and no place to sleep. The mother I used to be would have immediately called the hotel, paid the $4,000, booked them a flight home, and then worked overtime for a year to make up the difference, just to spare Maya from the pain of consequence. But then I looked down at my hands. I looked at the burn scars on my forearms from the commercial fryers. I looked at the swollen knuckles from decades of scrubbing pots. And I looked around the beautiful, empty room that I had just signed my name to. I had spent 50 years shielding Maya from the real world. I had acted as a human buffer between her and any form of discomfort, consequence, or reality. And what had it produced? A woman who felt entirely comfortable looking me in the eyes and telling me I belonged in the back of the plane while she drank champagne on my dime. I realized then that saving her today wouldn't actually be saving her. It would just be funding the delusion for one more day. Jordan's lies had finally caught up to him, and Maya's vanity had finally collided with a brick wall. The absolute best thing I could do for my daughter, the most loving maternal thing I could do in this exact moment, was to let her crash. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the Grand Wailea Resort. I didn't call Jordan. I opened my text messages and navigated to my conversation with Maya. I typed out a single, simple sentence. I didn't use exclamation points. I didn't express anger or vindictiveness. I just delivered the truth. I am not fixing this. Figure it out. I hit send. I watched the little green bubble appear on the screen, indicating the message had been delivered. Then I went into my phone settings and temporarily blocked both Maya and Jordan's phone numbers. I didn't want to hear the begging. I didn't want to hear the manipulation. They were adults. They had managed to navigate themselves into first class. They could figure out how to navigate themselves out of a hotel lobby. I put my phone back into my leather purse, stood up from the milk crate, and walked toward the front of the store. I picked up the heavy brass keys from the dusty countertop. I walked out the front door, pulling it shut behind me, and locked the deadbolt with a satisfying metallic click. As I walked down 4th Street, heading back toward the bus stop to go home and start planning my bakery menu, I felt a deep, profound sense of peace settling into my bones. The storm in Hawaii was raging, and I knew that when they eventually found their way back to Atlanta, the confrontation would be apocalyptic. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the storm, because I finally owned my own umbrella, and I wasn't sharing it anymore. It took them exactly 48 hours to make it back to Atlanta. 48 hours where my phone remained completely, blessedly silent. I spent that entire weekend inside my new commercial space, dressed in old paint-splattered overalls, scrubbing the floors on my hands and knees, and painting the walls a warm, inviting shade of buttercream yellow. My muscles ached in a completely different way than they did at the high school cafeteria. This wasn't the heavy, draining ache of working for someone else's bottom line. This was the sharp, satisfying soreness of finally building something for myself. By Sunday evening, I was sitting at my own small kitchen table back at my house. I had just brewed a cup of chamomile tea and was massaging my swollen knuckles with some lavender lotion, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard the heavy, aggressive thud of a car door slamming in my driveway. It was followed by another slam, and then the sound of heavy, fast footsteps marching up my front porch. I didn't even have time to stand up before my front door violently swung open. Maya still had a key, of course. For years, she had treated my house like a free 24-hour convenience store, breezing in whenever she needed to raid my pantry or drop off her laundry when her high-end washer was supposedly acting up. But she didn't breeze in tonight. She stormed in. I looked up from my teacup, and for a split second, I almost didn't recognize my own daughter. The perfectly polished, glossy Instagram aesthetic was completely gone. Maya's expensive, professionally styled hair was frizzy and shoved into a messy bun. She was wearing a wrinkled, oversized gray sweatshirt and a pair of stained sweatpants. Her designer makeup was entirely washed off, revealing deep, dark, exhausted circles under her eyes. She looked completely drained, utterly defeated, and absolutely furious. Jordan walked in a few steps behind her, gently pulling the front door shut. If Maya looked bad, Jordan looked worse. The slick, confident, smooth-talking salesman who had stood at the Delta check-in counter 2 days ago had vanished. He was practically slouching, his shoulders hunched forward, his eyes glued firmly to my hardwood floor. He looked exactly like a man walking to his own execution. "How could you?" Maya screamed. Her voice was so loud and sharp, it actually made the ceramic teacup rattle against its saucer. "How could you do that to me, Mom?" I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took a slow, methodical sip of my tea, feeling the warm liquid soothe my throat. "Good evening, Maya. Jordan, you had a safe flight back, I assume?" "Do not act like nothing happened," Maya shrieked, her hands balling into fists at her sides. She marched into the kitchen, her chest heaving. "Do you have any idea what we have been through for the last 2 days? Do you have any concept of the humiliation you put me through? The hotel manager threatened to call security on us. We had to sit in the lobby for 6 hours with all of our luggage, while Jordan begged his elderly father to take out a high-interest payday loan just to afford 2 economy tickets on a miserable red-eye flight back home. We slept on the floor of the Kahului airport, Mom. On the floor." She pointed a shaking finger at me, tears of pure rage spilling over her eyelashes. "You stranded us. You embarrassed me in front of the entire resort." I set my teacup down. I looked at her, truly looking at the grown woman standing in my kitchen throwing a spectacular toddler-level tantrum because her mother finally stopped paying her way. "I didn't strand you, Maya," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I simply went home. The person who stranded you is standing right behind you." Maya blinked, momentarily derailed by my calm tone. "What are you talking about?" I shifted my gaze from my daughter to the man cowering in the hallway. "Jordan, tell her. Tell her exactly what you said on the voicemail you accidentally left on my phone while you were screaming at each other in the lobby." Jordan's head snapped up. The remaining color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a deer trapped in the headlights of a speeding semi-truck. "What voicemail?" Maya demanded, whipping her head around to stare at her husband. "Jordan, what is she talking about?" When he still couldn't speak, I decided to do it for him. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. I smoothed down the front of my shirt, walked around the table, and stopped a few feet away from my daughter. 3 months, Maya," I said, keeping my voice steady and completely devoid of pity. "Your husband has been entirely unemployed for 3 full months. He lost his job. He maxed out every single credit card you both own. The $1,200 designer suitcases you brought to the airport? Paid for with money you don't have. The luxury leased cars sitting in your driveway? You are probably weeks away from repossession. You didn't get humiliated because I canceled my credit card authorization. You got humiliated because you have been living a complete lie, and the bill finally came due." Maya stared at me, her mouth slightly open, processing the words. Then she slowly turned back to Jordan. The rage in her eyes shifted from me to him. "Is she lying?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "Jordan, tell me she's lying. Tell me you didn't know about this." Jordan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Maya, I was going to tell you. I was trying to protect you. I had a few leads on some big consulting contracts. I thought I could secure an advance before the trip and cover the balances. I just needed a little more time." "You let me scream at my mother?" Maya said, her voice dropping into a dangerous, terrifyingly low octave. "You let me stand in that airport and treat her like garbage to get her to pay for a first-class upgrade, knowing we didn't have a single dollar to our names?" "I was desperate," Jordan cried out, finally showing some emotion. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Mama Samira, please," I panicked. The airline offered the upgrade at the kiosk, and I knew if I didn't take it, Maya would be suspicious about why we weren't flying first class for our anniversary. I thought we could just run it on your card and I would figure out how to pay you back later. I'm sorry. I messed up. You didn't just mess up, Jordan, I said coldly. You committed financial abuse. You manipulated a 50-year-old woman who works on her feet for 10 hours a day to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford. And Maya, you were perfectly willing to be an accomplice, as long as you didn't have to look at me while you drank your complimentary champagne. Maya whipped her head back toward me, her defensive walls instantly slamming back up. Even faced with her husband's absolute betrayal, her ego simply couldn't handle being the villain in her own story. You don't get to judge me, Maya yelled, pointing at me again. You offered to help us. You gave him the credit card. If you didn't want to pay for the trip, you should have just said no. Like a normal person instead of agreeing to it and then abandoning us on an island to be publicly humiliated. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. There it was, the absolute lack of accountability. Nothing was ever Maya's fault. It was always someone else's responsibility to manage her life, her finances, and her emotions. I am 50 years old, they said, measuring every single word. My knees pop every time I stand up in the morning. I smell like industrial bleach and fried food every single day so that you can smell like Chanel and post pictures of your perfect life on the internet. For 22 years, I have made myself incredibly small so that you could feel big. I paid your mortgage. I paid your son's tuition. And my grand reward for a lifetime of sacrifice was you telling me, to my face, that I belonged next to an airplane bathroom because I don't like fancy fuss anyway. Maya crossed her arms tightly across her chest, her jaw set stubbornly. It was a flight, Mom. You are acting like a child. You are blowing this completely out of proportion to punish me. I am not punishing you, I replied, feeling a strange, powerful sense of clarity wash over me. I am resigning. The Bank of Mom is permanently, irrevocably closed. I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up my purse, and pulled out the thick, multi-page commercial lease I had signed 2 days prior. I tossed it onto the kitchen table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying smack. Maya looked down at the document, then back up at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. What is that? That is a 5-year commercial lease for the vacant storefront on 4th Street, I said. I used my savings, the money Jordan was heavily relying on to bail him out of his unemployment crisis, to finally open my bakery. I am starting my own business. Every single dime I make from my cafeteria job, and every dime I make from that bakery, belongs entirely to me. I will not pay your mortgage this month. I will not cover Leo's private school tuition next semester. You are a married adult woman. Figure it out. The silence that followed was suffocating. The reality of the situation was finally piercing through Maya's thick armor of entitlement. The safety net was gone. The free ride was over. And she was staring down the barrel of massive credit card debt, an unemployed husband, and a lifestyle she could no longer artificially inflate. Maya's eyes darted frantically around my kitchen, as if searching for a loophole, a hidden camera, or some sign that this was all just a bad dream. When she realized I was completely serious, her expression shifted. The anger melted away, and a cold, calculating cruelty settled into her features. She realized that tears wouldn't work. Yelling wouldn't work. Guilt-tripping wouldn't work. So she reached for the absolute sharpest weapon she possessed. The one thing she knew could cut me straight to the bone. Fine, Maya said, her voice eerily calm and dripping with venom. If that's how you want to play this, Mom, if you want to abandon your family over a stupid airplane seat, if you care more about some ridiculous bakery dream than you do about your own flesh and blood. She took a step toward me, locking her eyes onto mine. If you cut us off financially, you will never see Leo again. The words hit me with the physical force of a freight train. My breath caught sharply in my throat, and my vision blurred for a split second. Leo, my sweet, bright 8-year-old grandson. The boy who loved to sit on my kitchen counter and help me measure flour. The boy who always drew me pictures of sunflowers because he knew they were my favorite. He was the softest, most beautiful part of my life. Maya saw the hesitation flash across my face. She saw the sudden, agonizing pain in my eyes, and a small, triumphant smirk ghosted across her lips. She thought she had won. She thought she had found the override code to my boundaries. That's right, Maya sneered, stepping closer. You think you can just drop us and go live your best life? Leo needs stability. He needs parents who aren't completely stressed out about losing their house. If you don't help us fix this mess, I will tell him his Nana doesn't love him anymore. I will block your number on his iPad. I will make sure you never attend another soccer game, school play, or birthday party as long as you live. Is your little bakery worth losing your only grandchild, Mom? Jordan stepped forward, looking horrified by his wife's words. Maya, stop. You can't use Leo like that. That's too far. Shut up, Jordan, she snapped viciously. She did this to us. She owes us. I stood absolutely still. My heart was breaking into 1,000 tiny, jagged pieces. The pain in my chest was so intense it radiated down my arms. The mother I was 3 days ago would have instantly surrendered. She would have written a blank check, canceled the bakery lease, and begged for forgiveness just to keep her grandson in her life. But the woman who had walked out of that airport wasn't there anymore. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the utter moral bankruptcy in her eyes. And I realized something profound and devastating. If I gave in to this extortion, I wouldn't be saving my relationship with Leo. I would be teaching him that women exist only to be used, threatened, and financially drained. I would be funding the very environment that was actively turning his mother into a monster. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain completely steady, even though my soul was shaking. If you choose to weaponize an 8-year-old boy because you are angry that you cannot fund your luxury lifestyle, I said, looking directly into Maya's eyes, then that is a sin you will have to carry on your own conscience, Maya, not mine. Maya's smirk instantly vanished. I'm serious, Mom, I'll do it. I know you will, I replied softly, because you love your image more than you love anyone else in this room. But I will not be extorted. I will not be threatened in my own home. And I will not buy my grandson's love by paying your bills. I walked over to the front door, grabbed the brass handle, and pulled it wide open, letting the cool evening air sweep into the stifling hallway. Get out of my house. Maya stared at me, genuinely shocked that her ultimate trump card had failed. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She looked at the open door, then at me, realizing for the very first time in her 30 years of life that my word was finally final. She turned on her heel, her face a mask of pure, humiliated rage. She stomped out the front door, marching down the driveway without a single backward glance. Jordan lingered for a moment. He looked at me, the heavy weight of his failures pulling his shoulders down. Mama Samira, I really am sorry. Go home, Jordan, I said quietly. You have a lot of resumes to send out. He nodded slowly, stepping out onto the porch. I gently closed the heavy wooden door behind him, turning the deadbolt until it clicked firmly into place. I stood in the entryway for a long time, listening to the roar of their car engine as they aggressively backed out of the driveway and sped down the street. The house was completely silent again. I walked into the living room, sat down heavily on the sofa, and covered my face with my hands. And then, the dam finally broke. I cried. I sobbed until my ribs physically ached. I cried for the daughter I had spoiled into entitlement. I cried for the years I had wasted being unappreciated. But mostly, I cried with a deep, agonizing, breathless grief for my sweet Leo, knowing it might be a very long time before I felt his little arms wrap around my neck again. I allowed myself to shatter completely for exactly 1 hour. And then, I stood up. I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at the 50-year-old woman staring back at me in the mirror. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her spine was perfectly straight. I walked back into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and pulled a yellow legal pad toward me. I picked up a pen, wiped a stray tear from my cheek, and began writing out the inventory list for my bakery's grand opening. I had lost a lot that night, but for the first time in my life, I hadn't lost myself. The next 4 weeks were the hardest, most beautiful, and most agonizing days of my entire life. I didn't hear a single word from Maya. Not a text, not a voicemail, nothing. The silence in my house was incredibly loud, especially on Sunday afternoons when I was used to cooking for them. The absence of my grandson Leo was a physical ache in my chest. Every time I walked past the spare bedroom where he kept his toys, my breath would catch. But I refused to pick up the phone. I knew that if I broke the silence, I would be teaching Maya that her cruel extortion tactic had worked. I had to stand firm, even if it felt like I was standing on shattered glass. So I poured every single ounce of my grief, my anxiety, and my newly reclaimed energy into the bakery. I woke up at 4 in the morning, went to my job at the high school cafeteria, managed the lunch rush, and then drove straight to the storefront on 4th Street. I painted walls until my shoulders cramped. I scrubbed industrial ovens until my fingernails cracked. I finalized permits, passed health inspections, and perfected my grandmother's sweet potato pie recipe until the crust was so flaky it melted the second it hit your tongue. Samira's Sweets officially opened on a crisp Tuesday morning. I didn't have a grand ribbon-cutting ceremony. I just unlocked the front door, flipped the open sign, and let the rich, intoxicating smell of cinnamon, brewing coffee, and brown sugar drift out onto the sidewalk. By the end of the first week, I had a line out the door. The neighborhood embraced me. People who had eaten my food in the school cafeteria for the last 20 years came out to support me. I was exhausted, but for the first time in 50 years, my bank account was growing from my own labor, and nobody was draining it behind my back. But out in the suburbs, the grand illusion was rapidly collapsing. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The lunch rush at the bakery had just ended, and I was wiping down the front counter when my cell phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I pulled it out. It was a number I hadn't seen in over a month because I had finally unblocked it a few days prior. Maya. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wiped my hands on a towel, took a deep breath, and pressed accept. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice incredibly neutral. "Mom?" The voice on the other end of the line was barely a whisper. It was thick, raspy, and completely broken. It didn't sound like the arrogant, glossy woman who had screamed at me in my kitchen. It sounded like a terrified little girl. "I'm here, Maya," I answered quietly. "Mom, I need you to tell me this is a mistake," she sobbed, the panic fully bleeding through the phone. "Please tell me the realtor is crazy. Tell me there's just a clerical error at the county office." I closed my eyes. I knew exactly what she was talking about. I had been waiting for this phone call for exactly 7 years. "What did the realtor tell you, Maya?" "The cars got repossessed yesterday," she cried, the words tumbling out of her in a frantic rush. "The tow trucks came right up into the driveway while the neighbors were watching. Jordan's credit cards are all in collections. We can't even buy groceries. So I told Jordan we had to sell the house. The market is high. I figured we could pull the equity, pay off the massive debt he hid from me, and downsize to an apartment. But the realtor... Mom, the realtor just pulled the public records to list the property." Maya choked on a sob, struggling to catch her breath. "She said I can't sign the listing agreement. She said my name isn't on the deed. She said Jordan's name isn't on the deed. She said the house belongs entirely to you. Mom, please. That's our house. We bought it. Tell me she's wrong." I leaned heavily against the bakery counter, looking out at the rain slicking the pavement on 4th Street. "She's not wrong, Maya," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking for the harsh reality she was finally crashing into. "I own the house. I am the sole name on the deed, and I am the sole name on the mortgage." But how?" she shrieked, the disbelief echoing through the receiver. "We picked it out. We lived there for 7 years. It's my house." "You picked out the curtains, Maya," I corrected her gently, but firmly. "But 7 years ago, when you and Jordan went to the bank to get pre-approved for that $400,000 mortgage, Jordan's credit score was in the mid-5s. He had unpaid medical bills, a defaulted car loan, and 0 verifiable income. The bank literally laughed him out of the office. Do you remember how much you cried? Do you remember telling me you couldn't bear the embarrassment of living in a starter apartment while all your friends on Instagram were buying mini mansions?" Complete silence on the other end of the line. The heavy, suffocating silence of a woman realizing her entire adult life had been a mirage. "I couldn't stand seeing you cry," I continued, speaking the unvarnished truth into the quiet bakery. "So I went back to the bank. I used my pristine credit score. I put down $80,000 of my own cash for the down payment. The bank would not allow Jordan's name anywhere near that loan. You both have essentially been my tenants for 7 years. I let you play house. And every time Jordan had a slow quarter and I quietly paid the mortgage, I was just paying my own property loan." "You let me believe I was a homeowner," Maya whispered, her voice dripping with betrayal. "You let me build a life in a house I didn't even own." I let you live in a beautiful, safe home for 7 years without ever holding the legal liability over your head, I replied, refusing to let her twist the narrative. I protected you from your husband's financial incompetence, but I will not let you sell my property to pay off Jordan's secret credit card debt. That house is my retirement, Maya. You cannot sell it. A sudden sharp sound came through the phone. It sounded like something glass shattering against a wall. Well, it doesn't even matter anymore, Maya wept, her voice completely devoid of hope. It doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? I asked, my maternal instincts flaring up. Because Jordan left. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean he left? When I got off the phone with the realtor, when I told Jordan that we didn't own the house and there was no equity to bail us out, he completely panicked, Maya choked out, the humiliation tearing her apart. He went into the bedroom, packed a duffel bag, and called an Uber. He told me he couldn't handle the pressure of bankruptcy. Mom, before he left, he logged into Leo's college savings account. The one you started for him. He emptied it. He took the last $4,000 we had to our names and he just left us here. I felt a cold, terrifying fury rise up in my chest. Jordan hadn't just been a liar and a leech. When cornered, he was a coward who stole from his own 8-year-old son. Maya, listen to me, I said, my voice dropping into a fierce, protective command. Where is Leo right now? He's at school. I have to walk to go pick him up in an hour because I don't have a car. Go get my grandson, I told her. Do not say another word to Jordan if he calls. Just go get Leo. She hung up the phone. I stood in the empty bakery, the smell of sugar suddenly making me feel nauseous. The grand illusion was completely dead, and my daughter was standing in the rubble. I didn't hear from her for the rest of Thursday. Friday passed in a blur of serving customers and anxiously checking my phone. Saturday and Sunday were agonizingly quiet. I debated driving over to the house, but I knew I couldn't. I had drawn a boundary. Maya had to be the one to cross it. She had to walk through the fire herself if she was ever going to respect the heat. The climax of this entire painful journey arrived on a gloomy, overcast Monday morning. The bakery was quiet. The morning coffee rush had died down, and I was in the back kitchen kneading a massive mound of dough. The little brass bell above the front door jingled. I wiped the flour off my hands, pushed open the swinging kitchen door, and froze. Standing in the center of my beautiful buttercream yellow bakery was Maya. She was holding Leo by the hand. I had never seen my daughter look like this. The expensive designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple faded t-shirt and a pair of plain jeans. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. She carried a single worn duffel bag over her shoulder. The arrogance, the entitlement, the desperate need to look superior to everyone around her, it was all completely stripped away. She looked exhausted, terrified, and painfully real. But my eyes instantly darted down to the little boy holding her hand. "Nana!" Leo cried out. He let go of his mother's hand, his little sneakers slapping against the scuffed floor, and ran full speed toward me. I dropped to my knees, not caring about the flour on my apron or the ache in my joints. I caught him in my arms, pulling his small, warm body tight against my chest. I buried my face in his neck, inhaling the smell of his little boy shampoo, and let the tears freely fall down my cheeks. "Oh, my sweet baby," I whispered, holding him so tight I was afraid I might break him. "Nana missed you so much. Nana loves you." "I missed you too, Nana," Leo mumbled into my shoulder. "Mommy said we're going to come see your new store. It smells really good in here." I kissed the top of his head, slowly standing back up, keeping one protective hand resting on his shoulder. I looked across the room at Maya. She wasn't glaring at me. She wasn't preparing a manipulative speech. She just stood there, staring at the floor, tears silently tracking down her face. "The bank officially froze all the checking accounts this morning," Maya said, her voice shaking. "Jordan's creditors put a lien on everything. The electricity at this house is getting shut off tomorrow. I have exactly $34 in my purse, Mom. That's it. That's my whole life." She finally lifted her head and looked me directly in the eyes. "You were right. About everything. I let him use you, and I used you too, because I was too terrified to admit I was a failure. I was so obsessed with making people on the internet jealous that I completely destroyed my own reality, and I treated the only person who actually loved me like absolute garbage." She took a shaky step forward. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry about the airport. I'm sorry about the money. I'm sorry about everything. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but Leo needs a place to sleep tonight. Please, I'll sleep on the floor in your living room. I don't have anywhere else to go." Looking at my daughter, stripped of her pride and begging for shelter, the mother inside me wanted to instantly wrap her in a blanket, hand her my credit card, and tell her I would fix it all. It would be so incredibly easy to fall right back into the old pattern. But if I did that, the last 2 months of agony would mean absolutely nothing. "You can stay in the spare room at my house," I said, my voice gentle, but carrying a weight of absolute authority. "Leo will keep going to his school. There is a roof, there is hot water, and there is food in the fridge. You are my daughter, and I will not let you and my grandson be on the street." A massive wave of relief washed over Maya's face. She closed her eyes, letting out a heavy, shuddering breath. "Thank you. Mom, thank you so much. I promise I'll pay you back eventually. I'll figure it out." "I'm not finished," I interrupted her. Maya's eyes snapped open. I reached behind the counter. I picked up a spare, heavy canvas apron. It was plain beige, completely unglamorous, and smelled like roasted pecans and dish soap. I walked around the counter, stepped right up to my daughter, and held the apron out to her. "The Bank of Mom is permanently closed," I told her, looking straight into her tear-filled eyes. "There are no more free rides. There are no more loans. If you want to live under my roof, eat my food, and use my electricity, you are going to work for it." Maya looked down at the rough canvas apron in my hands. "You are going to clock in here at Samira's Sweets at 6 o'clock every single morning," I said, my voice steady and unyielding. "You are going to sweep the floors. You are going to scrub the industrial baking pans until your hands cramp. You are going to stand behind that cash register, smile at the customers, and serve them coffee. I will pay you $15 an hour, which is minimum wage. You will use that money to buy your own gas, pay your own phone bill, and start paying off the mountain of debt you let your husband rack up." Maya stared at the apron. For a split second, I saw the ghost of the old Maya flash across her face, the Instagram aesthetic girl who would rather die than be seen scrubbing a baking sheet for minimum wage. I saw the hesitation. I saw the pride fighting a desperate battle against reality. I didn't move. I didn't soften my gaze. I held the apron out, waiting for her to make the ultimate choice. Slowly, her shoulders dropped. She reached out with trembling hands and took the apron from me. She didn't complain. She didn't argue. She slipped the loop over her head, tied the strings tightly behind her back, and looked back up at me. "Where are the mops, Mom?" she asked quietly. I offered her a very small, incredibly proud smile. "In the back closet, sweetheart. Let's get to work." Hello, everyone. My name is Samira. I am 50 years old, and today I own the most successful neighborhood bakery in my city. Maya has been working for me for over a year now. She doesn't have an Instagram account anymore. Her acrylic nails are gone, replaced by short, clean fingernails perfect for kneading dough. She smells like cinnamon and hard work. Jordan filed for divorce from 2 states away, and we haven't seen him since. It has been a brutally hard year, filled with tears, lawyers, and debt consolidators. But every afternoon, when the school bus drops Leo off at the bakery, he sits at the front table doing his homework while his mother and I work side by side behind the counter. For the first time in my entire life, my daughter respects me. Not because of what I can buy for her, but because of what I forced her to earn for herself. People often think that a mother's love means endless sacrifice. We are told to give until we are entirely empty, to be the soft place for our children to land, no matter how hard they push us. But sometimes, true maternal love isn't a safety net. Sometimes the most profound act of love you can give a grown child is a firm, unmoving brick wall. Sometimes the strongest, most beautiful move you can make isn't writing a check. It's simply walking away, opening your own bakery, and handing them an apron. What do you think? Was I right to cut the financial cord the way I did? Or would you have handled the situation at the airport differently? Let me know down in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you know the exhaustion of being the family ATM, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, it's never too late to stop sitting in the middle seat of your own life.